Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about how to save money with your fish tank. Now if you're like me and you have all these tanks, I'm down here in the fish room, we've got like 23 fish tanks down here and I've got more upstairs. If you have a bunch of tanks like this, forget about it pretty much. There are little ways of saving money here and there, but for the most part you're going to be spending a lot of money taking care of these fish. But let's go upstairs, let's sit in front of one of my tanks up there, and we'll talk about if you have a couple of tanks and just you're a normal fish keeper with 2 or 3 tanks, whatever, and how you can save money and hopefully continue to enjoy the hobby without going broke. Alright, so now we're upstairs, we're in my living room. This is kind of the chair that I kind of sit in and relax and just kind of enjoy my tanks here. And this is probably what a lot of you have. You probably have 2 or 3 tanks in your living room or your bedroom or wherever that you just enjoy. And you might notice that this hobby is not always inexpensive. You can spend a lot of money in the fish keeping hobby, regardless of what kind of fish you're keeping, if you haven't planned out properly or if you haven't taken a few steps. So I've been keeping fish for a long time. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've also done really well in doing things that was able to save me money, and I wanted to share that with you guys and kind of pass along some of this information. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to break it up into 3 kind of phases of how to save money. So the first one is going to be the initial cost. So this is like before you get your tank or as you're in that process, what are those initial costs and how can you save money there? And then the next part is going to be about stocking. So once you've gotten all your equipment and you have everything, how do you stock your aquariums? How do you make sure that you save money that way? Because that can get very expensive. And then the last part is going to be kind of the long-term savings goals. So we've had a tank for a while. How can we ensure that we continue to save money month after month after month and avoid some pitfalls? Okay, so let's start off with the initial cost. And I think the most important thing in this whole process is to have proper planning. So, and you've heard about, planning in lots of different fields, whether it's sports or, the work world. The better you plan, the better you will be prepared. And the same thing goes for fish keeping. So really do your homework to understand what's the exact, tank size that you can take care of. What kind of fish do you want? What's the best kind of a tank, as far as the size, but also the material, getting acrylic instead of glass. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, where acrylic is more expensive initially, but might end up saving you money down the road. So really planning to make sure that you have done all your homework and that you know what you want to do and exactly what you should be buying beforehand is going to be important. And in that planning process, one of the things that is important is to understand what type of equipment you're going to need for the fish that you want to keep. So do your research, understand what kind of tank that you want, also understand what kind of fish that you want to keep and do your research there, and then really think about what type of equipment is necessary to keep those fish healthy and happy. So things like filtration are going to be important. Do you want to have a couple of tanks running on an air system? Do you want to run a sump system? Do you want to drop a bunch of money on an expensive canister filter? So there are a lot of different options and they all have different pricing tiers as far as the cost of initial equipment, but also the cost of keeping them and upkeeping them. So if you have a canister filter, you will have an energy cost associated with that, in addition to having to spend $300 or so for that filter. If you run a hang on the back filter, the initial cost might be less. The energy might be similar depending on the size of the hang on the back filter, but depending on what you're putting in that filter, if you're the person that wants to buy like the cartridges that comes with the hang on the back filter, those can be expensive rather than kind of doing your own DIY kind of a thing. Or are you okay with running like an air pump and running some sponge filters, which is the most cost-effective way of running filtration? So understanding what you want to keep and what is the least expensive way of filtering those aquariums, and really asking around and looking at different options before you just go out and buy that expensive FX4 or FX6 and drop $300 on that filter. Know what options are out there for you. And then the same thing goes for other pieces of equipment. It might be how to move water in the tank. Can you use an air stone rather than an expensive power head? Can you, get the right type of heater that's not going to be on and off all the time? And maybe something that's a little bit more steady, less energy draw on a heater if you are running a heated tank. Lighting, so lighting is going to be important. What type of lights do you need for your tank? Do you need something that's going to, grow plants well? Or you just need something that's inexpensive that's going to show off your fish when you want to enjoy them? So understanding all that is involved before you buy that is going to be important. So understand, again, what kind of fish you want and what kind of tank you want. Really do your research and then find out, do I really need to buy this? Do I really need to buy that? Because it's very easy to get caught up in hearing someone say, oh, you bought this tank, you need to buy this FX4 filter. Anything less is not okay. You need to buy these lights. You need to buy this kind of heater. Next thing you know, you've dropped $1,000 on stuff before you even have one fish in your tank. So do your research, do your planning beforehand. You will save a lot of money that way. So now that you've done your research, you've planned out what tank you want, what kind of fish you're going to keep, what kind of lights do you really need for those fish, what kind of filtration can you get away with or do you need. Now let's talk about stocking the fish. So obviously you've done your homework beforehand. The most important thing here is to be patient. So don't just think, okay, I've got everything, I'm going to go out and find these amazing fish that are all colored up and I've got to order them from this breeder that's across the country or wherever. There might be options that are available locally. Talk to your local fish stores, look at your local fish clubs, talk to other hobbyists in the area. Go to different groups and see who's in your area that might be able to help source some of these fish for you. Maybe they're breeding fish, the kind of fish that you want, and you can get them for really inexpensive versus ordering them or going to some location and getting something that's more expensive. The other thing when it comes to being patient is if you buy fish that are smaller, meaning younger, then you can pay less for them and watch them grow up. So as an example behind me, which you probably can't see because it's out of focus right now, but I'll take some B-roll. These African cichlids, on most of them I bred. I did buy some of them though, and when I bought them small. And when I bought them, they cost me like $5 each. Some maybe a little bit more than that, like maybe $8 or $9. But for the most part, I didn't spend a ton of money, where I know that retail some of these fish are close to $30 when they're full grown. But me knowing that they're gonna be that way in 6 months or 8 months, I just bought them small, grew them out, or I bred them, and I was able to get these beautiful fish without having to drop a lot of money initially. The other thing when it comes to patience is making sure that your tank is set up and cycled. And I can't stress this enough. I've seen so many people set up a tank, get all this expensive equipment, throw in that bacteria turbostart or whatever it might be, drop the fish in, and not great success, right? Because they haven't allowed that tank to season, they haven't allowed the nitrogen cycle to complete, and maybe they overstocked it instead of just adding a couple of fish, and they had some fish die. And again, if you're patient, if you let your tank properly cycle and get set up, and then you add fish accordingly, then you are less likely to have those deaths. The same thing goes for aggression, so making sure that you do your research beforehand and knowing that what kind of fish are you adding to this tank, and can they cohabitate together? Will one eat the other one or kill the other one? And I still make that mistake. In fact, I made that mistake like a week ago, and I'll talk about that in another video, where I got some cool fish. I was told they'd be fine, I thought they'd be fine, but they weren't fine. So anyway, do your research there. That will save you some money as well. The other thing that's important when choosing fish is make sure that that's the fish that you want, because you don't want to impulse buy and buy something and then 2 months later on decide, nah, that's not really what I want, even though you paid a lot of money for that fish, and then you have to give that fish away because no one's gonna buy it from you, and then you go out and buy other fish. So again, truly understand what it is that you want with fish. The other thing that is important with understanding what kind of fish that you want and that you're gonna keep is what are they going to eat? And that is kind of a segue into the next topic when it comes to kind of the long-term savings. So if you have a fish that requires live food, that's going to cost more, because that means you either have to cultivate live food or you'll have to buy live food, and that can be a challenge. Or is it a fish that requires expensive food? So maybe you have some expensive puffer, or a large puffer I should say, that needs to eat expensive food like frozen clams and frozen cocktail shrimp and other things like that. Buying frozen clams from the grocery store is fine if you can afford it, but if you have to spend $100, $150, $200 a month in clams for your puffer fish, that might be more than you're willing or able to spend on food for your fish, when you could just buy you know, some type of pellet food or flake food for another type of fish where it might cost you $10 or $15 a month. So think about that also when it comes to the fish that you choose as far as long-term cost. What is it going to cost to maintain this fish? If it is that, you know, large puffer as an example, that fish is going to live a long time. Not only is it going to live a long time, it's going to require expensive foods. So it's not just like, you know, spending a couple $100 here and there. You're spending $100, $150, $200 a month for like a decade with these fish. So that is something to consider as well when you're looking at overall costs. Another thing when we're looking at long-term costs, and this is the one that I battle with all the time, and that's the cost of energy. Now, depending where you live in the world or depending where you live in the country, your energy costs are going to vary. In some states in the United States, energy is very expensive. In other states, it might be less expensive. And same thing for other countries. So the cost of energy is going to vary, but for the most part, it's still a huge expense that all of us are going to incur. And the cost of energy is electricity or heating, depending on how you're heating if you're heating your room or using gas or are using electricity to use heaters for your tanks. So the heat cost is going to be substantial if you're keeping tropical fish, and the energy cost can be substantial if you're running lots of pumps, filters, lights, etc. So make sure that you know how to manage your electricity bill, your gas bill. There are things that you can do. So going back to the earlier part of this video when I talked about glass versus acrylic, an acrylic tank is going to cost more than a glass tank, because the cost of acrylic is more than glass. It's cheap to make a glass aquarium. It's very expensive to make an acrylic aquarium due to the materials. However, there are some advantages to acrylic aquariums. One of those being that they are more efficient with retaining heat. It's almost like they're insulated versus glass. So if you do have, let's say, a 75-gallon aquarium, maybe one glass aquarium might cost $400 and the acrylic aquarium is going to be $1,200. That's a big difference between the two. However, long term down the road, not only is it the acrylic tank going to hold up better long term because it's less likely to have a failure, like, you know, breaking and leaking, where it's, you know, usually more robust and it doesn't have those kind of issues, but also it's going to reduce your electricity bill because you're not going to have to use a heater as much because it retains a lot of that heat. One option might be when you're doing your planning and your research phase is to think, okay, I can go out and buy a new, you know, glass aquarium and a stand for $600, or I can kind of shop around and try to find a used acrylic tank or something like that that might need a little bit of polishing and maybe find one for about the same price or a little bit less. It would be better off to find that good deal on that acrylic tank, take care of it, make sure it's a good one, polish off any kind of scratches, and you're gonna save money as far as energy is gonna be concerned, because it's gonna expel less heat from the sides of the aquarium. The other thing that's very important is to make sure that your tanks have lids on them. So just like, you know, anything, heat rises, right? So if you wear a hat, your body temperature is going to be warmer than if you take your hat off. Same thing with your aquarium. If you have a lid on it, you're trapping that heat inside the aquarium. It's not escaping through the surface of the water and out the top of the tank. So having a lid on your tank will help as well in maintaining that heat within the tank. The other thing that's important is, besides you know, having energy efficient equipment, which you want to do if you can, heaters and lights and things like that, LED versus, you know, other types of bulbs, is to have the lights on a timer. Now, this is an example of a timer that I have right here. These timers are like $6 or $7 at the hardware store, give or take. They might be less depending on where you are. They're really inexpensive. They're very, very simple. All you do is you plug it in. Well, you basically set the time on the dial for when you want the power to go on and off, and then you plug it in and you plug your device right into this timer. And I use timers on all of my lights. So every light that I use in my aquariums is on a timer. So regardless of whether I'm home or not, I never forget to turn a light off because it turns off automatically, and then they turn on automatically as well. Now, if you have a tank with plants in it, then you're going to want to make sure that you have the right amount of light for those plants. Maybe that's 8 hours, maybe it's 7 hours, maybe it's 9 or 10 hours. It depends on a lot of different factors: fertilizers, substrate, types of plants, etc., ambient light. But let's just say it's 8 hours as an example. If you have a planted aquarium with plants in it that needs that light for 8 hours, when do you want that light to turn on and when do you want it to turn off? Because you also want to enjoy that tank. So maybe you don't have the lights turn on until 1 in the afternoon, and maybe the lights turn off at 9 p.m. So the light turns on at 1 in the afternoon, it's on all day, you come home from school or work, you enjoy your tank at 5 o'clock, you see it till 9, the lights turn off automatically. If it's a tank that doesn't have plants in it and you don't need to maintain as much light in the tank, then I would not have the light turn on until you're going to be home. So the fish themselves don't need lights. The lights are for us to view the fish, or they're for the plants if you have plants in your aquarium for photosynthesis. So if you are just going to have a tank with African cichlids as an example and you don't have any plants in there, you don't have to have the light on all day. You can have that light turn on, let's say at 5 p.m. and maybe turn off at 9 p.m. So that light is only on for 4 hours, and that's a whole lot less energy that you are spending by not having the lights on all day. So that not only is that going to save you money as far as having less electricity being drawn, but you'll have other benefits like not having algae on the glass, etc., which will also benefit you. So anyway, those are some tips that I had. I know this was a lot of talking, it was a long video, but I did want to cover all those topics, all those different areas, and share with you some ideas on how to save money. And I would welcome any suggestions down below in the comments. Comment how you save money, what do you do, and maybe what are some of the mistakes that you've made over the years or over the months and weeks when it comes to fish keeping that cost you money. I know I've made lots of mistakes, and I still do from time to time, like what happened the other day or the other week with the fish that I bought that ended up predating on the other fish, which is very unfortunate, but it does happen. So anyway, comment down below what you've done, what you do, what you've learned. I'd love to read it. I'd love to hear it. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.